The unexpected capture. John had always lived a quiet life. A normal guy, living in a small town, working at a grocery store, and spending his evenings with his friends or watching TV. Nothing special ever happened to him. He had dreams of adventure, of maybe traveling the world. But that was just fantasy. His life was simple, uneventful, and predictable. One evening, everything changed. It started like any other night. John was locking up the store, glancing at the clock. It was past closing time. He turned off the lights and stepped outside into the cool night air. He was tired but glad the day was over. As he walked to his car, he noticed something strange, a bright light in the sky. At first, he thought it was a plane or a shooting star, but the light grew brighter, larger, and closer. It didn't move like anything he had ever seen. It wasn't a plane, and it wasn't a star. Suddenly, the light was blinding. John shielded his eyes, feeling an intense warmth surround him. Before he could even react, a strong force pulled him off the ground. The ground beneath his feet disappeared, and the next thing he knew, he was floating. Panicking, he tried to scream, but no sound came out. It felt like his body was being dragged through the air, as if something invisible had wrapped around him and was pulling him faster than he could understand. John's heart raced as he tried to move, but his limbs were frozen, stiff. It was like he was caught in a dream. But this was no dream. This was real. The light that had surrounded him began to flicker, and then he saw it, a massive ship in the sky, unlike anything he had ever seen. It was huge, shaped like a dark, menacing triangle, its surface gleaming in the light of the stars. It was as if the ship itself was alive, a creature from another world. Before John could fully grasp what was happening, he was pulled inside the ship. His surroundings shifted from the peaceful night sky to a cold, metallic chamber. He blinked in confusion, unable to comprehend what was happening. He had heard stories, maybe even seen movies about aliens, but this was beyond anything he could have imagined. He was dragged across the floor of the cold, metallic room by invisible hands. The walls were lined with strange, glowing symbols, flickering in colors John didn't recognize. A low hum filled the air, and the room felt alive with energy. He tried to scream, to ask what was happening, but his mouth felt dry, his voice lost in the overwhelming silence. As he looked around, he saw several other figures standing motionless in the shadows. Some were human, like him, but others, they were not. There were tall beings, their skin pale and their eyes glowing faintly. Their features were sharp, almost otherworldly. He had no idea who they were, but they looked down at him with an expression of quiet interest. Suddenly, a figure stepped forward, its face hidden in a hooded cloak. It was a woman, but not human. She was taller than John, her skin a soft shade of blue, with eyes that seemed to glow with a light of their own. Her voice, when she spoke, was calm but commanding. "You are the one," she said, her voice echoing in the silent room. "The chosen one, the one we have waited for." John's mind was spinning. Chosen for what? He didn't understand. He tried to step back, but his legs felt weak, as if they didn't belong to him anymore. He couldn't move. He was trapped. The blue-skinned woman raised her hand, and the strange force that had pulled him in earlier released its grip. John fell to his knees, gasping for air. His head spun, and he looked around desperately, but everything felt wrong. He didn't belong here. He was just an ordinary guy. What was he doing on this alien ship? And why was he being treated like some kind of hero? The woman knelt down in front of him, her glowing eyes studying him with an intensity that made him feel exposed. "You are not just a human," she said, almost as if she was speaking to herself. "You carry within you a power that has been hidden for centuries." John blinked in disbelief. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his voice trembling. "I'm just a guy, a regular guy from Earth." The woman smiled slightly, as if she understood his confusion. You may not understand yet, but you will. You are the key to saving us all, to ending the war, to stopping the destruction." John's heart pounded in his chest. What was she talking about? What war? What destruction? He was just a guy, just trying to live his life. How could he possibly be the key to anything? The thought was insane. Before he could ask more questions, a voice interrupted, deep and powerful. Another figure stepped forward, a towering alien with dark, red skin and a crown-like structure on his head. He looked down at John with cold eyes, his expression unreadable. "Enough of this. The prophecy is clear. He is the one. We will make sure he fulfills his destiny," the red-skinned figure said. The woman looked at him, her eyes narrowing. "You are too hasty. He must be prepared. We cannot force him into something he is not ready for." John's mind raced as he tried to process everything that was happening. A prophecy, a war, him. This couldn't be real. But the cold, metallic room, the strange voices, and the alien beings standing before him told him otherwise. Where am I? What do you want with me?" John asked, his voice shaking. The blue-skinned woman leaned closer, her eyes softening. "You have been chosen to be more than just a sacrifice. You have been chosen to be our savior, the one who will bring balance to the world. We will teach you, train you, and prepare you for the battle that lies ahead." John felt a wave of fear wash over him. He was in the middle of something far bigger than anything he had ever imagined. And he had no idea how to escape. He was far from home, in a place he didn't understand, surrounded by beings who believed he held the power to change the fate of their world. But there was one thing John knew for sure. His life would never be the same again. The ancient prophecy. John's mind was in chaos. Everything that had just happened felt like a dream. A strange, terrifying dream that he couldn't wake up from. One moment, he was a simple grocery store worker. And the next, he was standing in the middle of an alien spaceship, surrounded by beings who claimed he was the key to their survival. He had heard of prophecies before, mostly in movies or stories, but never in his wildest dreams did he imagine becoming the center of one. Yet here he was, being told that he had a destiny far beyond anything he could comprehend. The woman, the blue-skinned being who had spoken to him, stood calmly in front of him, her glowing eyes fixed on him. "You don't understand yet, but you will. The prophecy is older than time itself. It speaks of one who would come from a distant world. A human. The last hope for our people." John blinked, still trying to process the words. "A human? I'm just a guy. You've got the wrong person. I don't know anything about prophecies or whatever it is you want me to do." The blue-skinned woman's face softened for a moment, as if she could sense his confusion and fear. She knelt down to his level, her glowing eyes never leaving his. "You are more than you think, John. The prophecy does not lie. It has guided us for centuries. But it has also kept us in darkness, waiting for someone like you." John shook his head, stepping back. "I'm nobody. I'm not a hero. I'm just me." "Exactly," she said with a soft smile, her voice warm despite the coldness of the ship. "That's why you are the one. The prophecy speaks of a human, one who would rise when all hope was lost. You see, we are a dying race, John. Our enemies, the Zerrikans, have waged war on us for centuries. We've fought battles, lost countless lives, and yet we've never been able to stop them. But the prophecy, it spoke of a human who would bring the balance we so desperately need." John's heart raced in his chest. "I don't get it. What do you mean, bring balance? How could I possibly do that?" The woman rose to her feet, turning her gaze toward the walls of the ship. The glowing symbols flickered softly, casting eerie shadows on the cold metal surfaces. "The Zerrikans are not like us. They are a warrior race, fierce and relentless. For centuries, we have tried to reason with them, to find peace, but they only seek war and destruction. Our people are dying, John. Our civilization is on the brink of collapse." She walked slowly around him, her eyes tracing the patterns on the walls. The prophecy spoke of a human who would possess something unique, something that no alien race has, a power that could defeat the Zerrikans and end the war. That power is within you. John frowned. He felt a growing knot of fear in his stomach. Power? I don't have any power. I'm just a regular guy. I don't even know what's going on here. How am I supposed to stop a war? How am I supposed to save you all? The woman stopped in front of him, her expression serious. You may not realize it now, but you are already starting to tap into that power. It is in your blood, in your very being. It is what makes you human. The Zerrikans may have strength and advanced technology, but you have something they cannot understand, a connection to the universe, a strength born from your humanity. That is the power we need. John felt his hands tremble. He was caught in the middle of something beyond his comprehension. Was he really supposed to be some kind of savior? It all felt so wrong. How could he, someone who couldn't even fight his own battles, be the one to end a war between two powerful alien races? Why me? John whispered. Why not someone else? The blue-skinned woman's face softened once again. The prophecy was clear. John, the universe has chosen you, not because you are the strongest or the most powerful, but because you have the potential to change everything. You are the key, not because of what you are, but because of who you are. Your ability to adapt, to think differently from us, is what sets you apart. That is the power the prophecy spoke of. John was silent for a long moment. He could hear the hum of the ship around him, the distant voices of other beings speaking in a language he didn't understand. He was overwhelmed, lost in a sea of unfamiliarity. He was a stranger in a strange world, and the weight of what the blue-skinned woman was saying was starting to sink in. But the fear, the doubt, it still gripped him tightly. What happens now? John asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The woman stood tall, her eyes glowing with a fierce light. Now, you begin your training. You must understand the power that lies within you and how to control it. We will teach you. We will guide you. But you must be willing to learn, to embrace what is inside you. Only then will you be able to face the Zerrikans and end this war. John swallowed hard. The room felt like it was closing in on him. He wanted to say something, anything to deny it, to refuse the responsibility that was being forced upon him. But there was something in the woman's eyes, something ancient and knowing, that made him hesitate. He knew he had no choice. The prophecy had already begun, and he was now a part of it, whether he liked it or not. The blue-skinned woman extended her hand toward him, a silent invitation. Will you accept your fate, John? For a long moment, John stood frozen, staring at her outstretched hand. He didn't know what he was about to embark on, but deep down, he felt something stir within him, a part of him. The part that had always dreamed of adventure, of something greater, was waking up. He wasn't just a regular guy anymore. He was about to face a destiny that had been waiting for him all along. With a deep breath, he reached out and took her hand. As his fingers brushed against hers, he felt a strange energy surge through him. It wasn't like anything he had ever felt before. It was powerful, overwhelming, and yet strangely comforting. This was only the beginning, but John knew one thing for sure. Nothing in his life would ever be the same again. The Oracle's revelation. John's heart was still racing. His mind swirled with uncertainty as he followed the blue-skinned woman deeper into the alien ship. Each step echoed through the cold, metallic hallways. The air smelled strange, like burnt ozone mixed with something ancient, like the remnants of forgotten dreams. It felt like they were walking through the belly of some colossal creature, a living entity made of metal and light. And in that moment, John wondered if this was truly real, or if he was still trapped in some kind of bizarre dream. The woman led him into a vast chamber, unlike any part of the ship he had seen before. The room was bathed in a soft, ethereal glow. It was circular, with walls made of shimmering, translucent material that seemed to pulse with energy. At the center of the room stood an ancient structure, a large crystalline object, shaped like a tree. Its roots spread across the floor, and its branches reached up toward the ceiling, where they dissolved into a swirling mist. It wasn't just a tree. It was alive. "This is the Oracle," the woman said softly, her voice filled with reverence. "The source of our knowledge, our guidance. The Oracle has watched over our people for thousands of years." John's eyes widened in awe. The tree-like structure before him seemed to hum with an energy that was both peaceful and overwhelming. It was as if it knew everything, the past, the present, and the future, and yet it remained silent, waiting. The woman stepped forward, bowing slightly before the Oracle. She turned to John, her expression serious. "The Oracle has seen the future. It knows the path we must take, and it knows that you are the one who will change everything." John wasn't sure what he expected, but it certainly wasn't this. A tree. An oracle. Was this some kind of alien religion or mystical tradition? It all felt so surreal. He couldn't grasp how this could be real, how he, just an ordinary man from Earth, was somehow part of this ancient alien prophecy. The oracle's branches began to glow brighter, and for a moment, the entire room seemed to vibrate with energy. The blue-skinned woman stepped back, giving John space. Her eyes watched him closely, as if waiting for something. "Approach," she said softly. John hesitated for a moment, but curiosity, mixed with a lingering sense of dread, pushed him forward. As he took his first step toward the glowing tree, he felt the temperature in the room drop. His breath became visible in the air, a faint mist rising from his lips. It felt like the very atmosphere around him was alive, watching, waiting. When John reached the Oracle, the ground beneath him seemed to shift, and for a split second, he thought he was going to fall. But instead, he was pulled in by an unseen force, his body drawn closer to the center of the glowing structure. The tree's branches reached out toward him, and before he could react, the light enveloped him. It wasn't like anything he had ever experienced. The world around him disappeared. He wasn't in the ship anymore. He was somewhere else, somewhere vast and infinite. A deep silence filled the space, and John could feel something stirring inside of him. It was as if the Oracle was speaking directly to his soul, its presence both calming and terrifying at once. And then, in the stillness, a voice spoke, a voice that was both distant and immediate, as if it came from the very core of the universe. "John," the voice whispered, a soft murmur that echoed in his mind. "You are here, as it was foretold." John's breath caught in his throat. The voice was not coming from the blue-skinned woman. It was coming from the Oracle itself. He could feel its presence, its ancient wisdom, flooding into his consciousness. For a moment, he couldn't move, couldn't speak. He was trapped in this strange, suspended reality, where time seemed to stand still. "The prophecy has waited for you," the voice continued. "It is not just your physical strength that will save us, but your heart, your courage, the very essence of what it means to be human." John wanted to speak, to ask questions, but the words wouldn't come. The Oracle's presence was overwhelming, filling every corner of his mind. He felt the weight of centuries of knowledge pressing against him, and he knew, deep down, that this was the moment when everything would change. "The Zerrikans have ravaged our people for too long," the Oracle's voice continued, growing stronger. "They are a race of destruction, a force without compassion. They seek only power, and in their greed, they destroy everything they touch. They believe in might, in domination. But you, John, you are the key to defeating them. You have something they cannot understand, something they cannot conquer. You have the power of hope." John felt a jolt in his chest, as if the Oracle's words had struck a chord deep within him. He had never thought of himself as someone capable of great things. But somehow, standing here, in the presence of this ancient being, he could feel something awakening inside him. A power, yes, but also something more. A sense of responsibility, a sense of duty. The oracle's branches trembled, and a bright, blinding light filled the room. For a moment, John thought he might lose himself in it, but instead, the light surrounded him, wrapping around him like a cloak. He could feel it. This was it. The power. It wasn't something physical. It wasn't a weapon or a force of destruction. It was something deeper, something connected to the core of who he was. It was the strength to endure, to fight for what was right, even when the odds seemed impossible. The power you seek, the oracle said, is not given to you to wield as a weapon. It is a gift of the spirit. It is the power of resilience, of hope, of defiance in the face of despair. It is what makes you human. It is what makes you strong. John felt a tear slip down his cheek. He wasn't sure why, perhaps because of the overwhelming weight of the moment, or perhaps because he realized, deep down, that the oracle was right. He wasn't just a man from Earth anymore. He had a purpose, a role in something much larger than himself. The light around him began to fade, and he slowly returned to the reality of the ship's chamber. The oracle's voice softened, growing faint. You are ready, John. The path ahead is uncertain, but you are not alone. The strength within you is enough to face the darkness that lies ahead. Trust in yourself, for that is where true power lies. As the light dimmed and the room returned to its quiet stillness, John found himself standing before the oracle once more, the weight of what had just transpired sinking in. He had felt it. The power, the responsibility, the weight of his destiny. It was real. The blue-skinned woman stepped forward, her eyes soft with understanding. You are ready, she said, her voice filled with hope. Now we begin your training. The battle for our future has already started, and you are our only hope. John nodded slowly, still trying to grasp everything he had just experienced. But one thing was certain, he had changed. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges and unknowns, but for the first time in his life, John felt ready. Ready to fight. Ready to change the future. This section dives deeper into the oracle's prophecy, revealing the true nature of John's power and how it connects to his humanity. It highlights his inner transformation and sets the stage for the challenges ahead, making it clear that John is about to take on a much larger responsibility. The oracle's revelation is meant to feel mystical, yet empowering, leaving John and the audience aware that this is just the beginning of his journey. An unlikely savior. John stood in the center of the dimly lit chamber, his heart still racing from the revelations of the oracle. He had always believed his life would follow a simple, predictable path. But now, everything had changed. He was no longer just a grocery store clerk from Earth. He was the key to ending an ancient war, the one who held the power to save an alien race from extinction. The weight of it all pressed down on him, but even as doubt clawed at his mind, something inside him stirred. A quiet resolve. The blue-skinned woman, whose name he had learned was Lyra, watched him closely. She had been kind to him, patient, and now she seemed to carry the burden of an entire civilization's hopes on her shoulders. She had seen something in him, something even he hadn't yet understood, and she was determined to help him unlock that potential. It's time for your training, she said, her voice firm but not unkind. You must understand the power within you before you can face the Zerrikans. The oracle has given you a gift, but it's up to you to learn how to use it. John nodded, though a part of him wanted to run, to scream, to demand that they send him home. He didn't belong here. He wasn't a hero. But that part of him, the part that had been so ordinary, so frightened, was beginning to shrink. Maybe it was the oracle's words, or maybe it was the strange energy that seemed to still buzz beneath his skin, but John knew one thing. He couldn't turn back. There was no going back to his old life. Whatever this power was, whatever the oracle had seen in him, he had to learn to control it. Lyra led him down a long corridor, its walls lined with more of the strange glowing symbols. The hum of the ship was constant, like a heartbeat, resonating deep in his bones. He felt an odd sense of connection to the ship now, as if he were a part of it, like the energy that surged through its walls also surged through him. It wasn't just a machine. It was alive, and he was part of it. They arrived at a training room, stark and utilitarian, with no windows, just cold, smooth surfaces. In the center of the room was a large, spherical object, glowing with a soft blue light. Lyra motioned for John to step forward. "This," she began, her voice steady, "is the first step. The orb of focus. It will help you connect with the power inside you." John stared at the orb, sensing an unfamiliar pull. The air around it seemed charged with energy, crackling like static electricity. He took a tentative step closer, the hairs on the back of his neck standing on end. He wasn't sure if he was ready, but he felt something. A compulsion, urging him forward. "You must touch it," Lyra said. "Focus your mind. Let the orb guide you to the power the Oracle spoke of. Trust yourself. Trust the power within you." John's fingers trembled as he extended his hand toward the orb. The moment his skin made contact with the glowing surface, a shockwave of energy coursed through his arm, making his entire body tense. His mind went blank for a moment, and then he saw flashes, images, memories, feelings, all rushing into him at once. He saw himself standing tall, facing an army of Zerrikans. Their red eyes gleamed with malice, their weapons raised. But he wasn't afraid. He was stronger, faster, his body glowing with an intense energy he couldn't yet understand. The Zerrikans faltered before him, their faces twisted with fear. He wasn't just fighting them, he was stopping them. And then, just as quickly as it had come, the vision vanished. John stumbled back, pulling his hand away from the orb. His breathing was heavy, his heart pounding in his chest. What had just happened? Was that a future, a possible future? Or was it just a vision, a figment of his imagination? Lyra stood silent, watching him closely. "What did you see?" she asked. John shook his head, trying to clear the confusion. I saw myself, fighting the Zerrikans. I don't know how, but I wasn't afraid. I had this power. It was like nothing I've ever felt." Lyra nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "That was your first connection. The orb of focus helps you tap into the power you already have. It's not something new. It's something ancient, something that has always been inside you. The Oracle has awakened it." John looked down at his hands, feeling the faint buzzing of energy beneath his skin. He wasn't sure how to control it, but he could feel it now, like a fire, waiting to be stoked. It scared him, but it also excited him. This was real. He wasn't dreaming. The future was in his hands, whether he was ready for it or not. "You have the ability to control this energy," Lyra continued. "It's not just physical strength, like the Zerrikans. It's a power of the mind, of the soul. The Oracle spoke of hope, of resilience, of defiance. These are the qualities that will make you stronger than the Zerrikans. And now you must learn to harness them." John's mind swirled with the weight of her words. Hope, resilience. He had never thought of himself in those terms. He had always just been ordinary, weak even, but something in him had changed. He wasn't the same man who had stepped onto this ship. The Oracle had seen something in him. Lyra had seen something in him. Maybe it was time he started seeing it too. Lyra walked to the far side of the room and picked up a small silver device. "Now we will train your body to withstand the energy. You will learn to control it, to use it in combat. But before that, you must learn discipline." She threw the device in the air, and in an instant, it split into multiple floating fragments, each one glowing with energy. John blinked, unsure of what he was seeing. "Focus," Lyra said, her voice low but commanding. "Control your mind. Channel the energy." The fragments hovered around him, circling like vultures. John felt a wave of panic rise in his chest. He wasn't ready for this. He hadn't even learned to control the power yet. How could he possibly control these floating shards? But then he remembered the vision. He remembered the calm, the strength, the certainty he had felt. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and focused. He thought about the power inside him, the energy that was waiting to be used. He reached out, not physically, but with his mind. He imagined the fragments aligning, coming together in perfect unity. To his shock, the fragments began to shift. One by one, they stopped moving erratically, floating steadily in the air around him. John held his breath as the last fragment gently settled into place, forming a perfect sphere. The room was silent except for the faint hum of energy. Lyra's voice broke the stillness. "Well done, John. You are learning faster than I expected." John stood frozen for a moment, staring at the floating sphere. He had done it. He had controlled it. He could feel the power surging through him. And for the first time, he understood what Lyra had meant. This wasn't just about fighting. It was about mastering himself, his mind, his soul, and the universe around him. He wasn't just learning how to fight the Zerrikans. He was learning to be something more. A savior, a protector, an unlikely hero, born from the most ordinary of lives. But now, he was beginning to understand that sometimes the most ordinary people are the ones who change the world. Lyra smiled at him, her eyes filled with pride. "This is only the beginning, but I believe you are ready for what comes next." John nodded slowly, the weight of his new role settling in. The road ahead was long, and he didn't know if he would ever be truly ready. But one thing was clear. He was no longer just a bystander in his own life. He had a purpose now, and he would fight to see it through, no matter what. Trial of strength. The days that followed felt like a blur of intense training. John could hardly believe how quickly everything had changed. One moment, he was a regular guy, living an ordinary life on Earth. The next, he was on a strange alien ship, learning to harness an ancient power that was both overwhelming and exhilarating. But even as he grew stronger, even as the energy within him became more and more accessible, John knew that it wasn't enough. Not yet. Lyra had told him that true strength came not just from controlling the energy, but from understanding it. He had to master both his body and his mind, shaping himself into someone who could face the Zerrikans and stop them from destroying the Xantari race. The pressure weighed heavily on him. The war was still raging out there, and he was the only one who could end it. Today, the training would be different. Lyra had led him to an arena-like chamber, a vast open space with smooth, polished floors. The walls were lined with glowing symbols, their meanings lost on John but clearly important to the Xantari. He could feel the tension in the air, an undercurrent of anticipation that seemed to vibrate through the floor and into his bones. The room wasn't just for practice. It was a place of true combat. "This is where you will face your first real test, John," Lyra said, her voice calm but filled with purpose. "We will push you to your limits. You must prove that you can wield the power within you, that you can control it when it matters most." John nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. He had trained with the orb of focus, learning to center himself, to pull energy from within and focus it outward. He had spent hours learning to manipulate smaller objects, to defend himself from illusions and distractions, and even to block attacks that weren't really there. But he had never faced anything like this. He wasn't sure if he was ready, but he had no choice. There was no turning back now. Across from him, in the center of the arena, stood an imposing figure, one of the Zerrikans. This one was larger than the ones John had seen in brief glimpses. His red skin gleamed under the harsh lights of the arena, and his eyes burned with a cold, ruthless fire. He carried a massive weapon, an energy blade that crackled with power. John's breath caught in his throat. The Zerrikans were fierce warriors, trained in combat since birth. They fought with brutal efficiency, using their superior strength and technology to crush anyone who stood in their way. He was about to face one of them, in hand-to-hand combat. He wasn't sure how he could even hope to stand a chance. "This is your trial," Lyra said, her voice stern and unwavering. "You will face this warrior, one of our most skilled fighters. He will test your ability to control the power within you, to see if you are truly ready for what lies ahead. Do not hold back. John swallowed hard, feeling the pressure mounting. He had no idea how to fight someone like this. He could feel the energy coursing through him, but he had only just started learning how to control it. Could he really use it in a real fight? The Zarkan stepped forward, raising his weapon. The blade crackled, sending out arcs of energy. John's heart raced as the Zarkan spoke in a language John couldn't understand, but the tone was unmistakably threatening. He was being challenged, and there was no way out. Lyra's voice broke through his panic. Remember, John, this is not just about strength. It's about control. Use your mind. Trust the power within you. The Zarkan lunged forward, moving faster than John could have ever imagined. John barely managed to sidestep the strike, his instincts taking over. His body moved without thinking, avoiding the blade by inches. He could feel the power inside him surging, urging him to fight back. But he hesitated. What if he lost control? What if he hurt someone? He didn't want to be a monster. The Zarkan attacked again, this time with a series of rapid, deadly strikes. John barely had time to react. He had to think. He had to focus. Focus, Lyra's voice echoed in his mind. Control your fear. Control the power. John took a deep breath, his mind clearing as he centered himself. He remembered the orb of focus, the calm he had felt when he connected with it. He reached deep inside, not just to find the power, but to understand it. It wasn't about brute force, it was about balance. The power was a part of him, not something separate. It was his connection to the universe, to everything. And if he could control himself, he could control it. He stepped forward, this time with purpose. The Zarkan swung his blade at him, but John was ready. With a fluid motion, he raised his hand, and a surge of energy exploded outward, knocking the Zarkan off balance. The Zarkan staggered, surprised by the force of the attack. John didn't wait for him to recover. He moved quickly, using the energy to propel himself forward, his body moving with more speed than he had ever known. The Zarkan growled, recovering quickly. He raised his weapon to strike again, but John was faster now. He reached out with his mind, focusing on the Zarkan's movements. He didn't need to see where the attack would land. He could feel it. He stepped aside just in time, the blade swiping the air where he had been only a moment before. John countered with a strike of his own, using the energy in his hand to create a shockwave that sent the Zarkan crashing into the arena wall. The Zarkan groaned but quickly regained his footing. He was not defeated, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. John could see it. This wasn't going the way the Zarkan had expected. Lyra watched from the sidelines, her eyes focused, as if she were studying John's every move. "Control," she murmured. "Let the power flow through you, but do not become consumed by it." John nodded, his breath coming in short bursts. The energy within him was rising, but he fought to keep it in check. He wasn't just fighting the Zarkan. He was fighting his own fear, his doubt. The power was there, but if he lost control, everything could go wrong. The Zarkan lunged again, more ferociously this time. John knew he had to end this quickly. He channeled all his energy into his legs, propelling himself toward the Zarkan, with a speed he had never felt before. He reached out with both hands, and a burst of energy exploded from him, surrounding the Zarkan and lifting him off the ground. The Zarkan struggled, but John held him there, the power flowing through him like an unstoppable force. Enough. Lyra's voice rang out, and John immediately released the Zarkan, who crashed to the ground. The fight was over. The Zarkan lay on the floor, panting, but he didn't rise. He had been beaten, but John hadn't killed him. He hadn't even seriously injured him. He had won through control, through understanding. For the first time, John realized what Lyra had meant. This power wasn't about destruction. It was about defense. It was about balance. John stood panting, his body sore but exhilarated. He had done it. He had faced the trial and won, not just with strength, but with control. He had taken the first step toward becoming the hero the Oracle had seen in him. Lyra walked forward, a small smile on her face. "Well done, John. You've passed the first trial. But remember, this is just the beginning. There will be many more tests ahead. The real battle is yet to come." John nodded, his resolve hardening. He had proven something to himself today. He wasn't just a regular guy anymore. He was more. He could feel the weight of the future ahead of him, and he knew, no matter how hard the road would be, that he was ready to face it. Battle for the future. The days that followed were filled with a growing sense of urgency. John's training had intensified, and the ship's corridors seemed to hum with anticipation. Word had spread among the Xantari that their last hope had begun to show promise. John could feel the weight of it more than ever. He wasn't just training to survive anymore. He was training for war. The Xericans had launched a massive offensive. Their fleet was now positioned on the edge of Xantari space, threatening to obliterate what remained of their civilization. For centuries, the Xantari had been unable to stop them. Now they had one final chance, and it was resting on John's shoulders. In the war room, Lyra and the Xantari High Council stood before a holographic map of the galaxy. The image showed the advancing Zarkan fleet, moving relentlessly toward the heart of the Xantari homeworld. The map was dotted with red blips, representing the warships, and blue blips, the remnants of the Xantari defenses. It was a losing battle. "We cannot hold them off much longer," one of the council members said, his voice tense with worry. "Their forces are too strong. We need more time, but we won't get it." Lyra turned to John, her expression unwavering. "It's time, John. The Xericans are almost here. You are ready. You've trained long enough. Now you must fight." John's stomach tightened at her words. He had trained for this moment, but now that it was here, the reality of it hit him like a tidal wave. He wasn't ready to face an entire enemy fleet, not by himself, but there was no choice. He had to trust in the power the Oracle had unlocked within him. He wasn't just a man anymore. He was a weapon. And the Xantari's survival depended on him. He looked at Lyra, her calm gaze steadying his nerves. "I've never fought anything like this before," he said, his voice heavy with doubt. "I don't know if I can do this. I've only just learned how to control my powers. How am I supposed to stop an entire army?" Lyra placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch reassuring but firm. "You're not alone. We will be with you, guiding you. You have more power than you realize. The Xericans believe in might and force. But you, John, you are the embodiment of something they cannot understand. You have the power of hope. That is what will make you different. That is what will make you stronger." John nodded slowly, feeling the weight of her words settle into his chest. Hope. It was a strange concept to him, something abstract, something he had never really considered in his life. But in this moment, with the fate of the Xantari resting on his shoulders, he realized that it wasn't just about physical power. Hope was the strength to keep fighting, even when the odds were stacked against you. It was the resilience to stand tall in the face of impossible odds. Suddenly, the room shook as an alarm blared, filling the air with a shrill, urgent sound. The holographic map shifted, and John saw it. The Zarkan fleet was closing in on their position. The battle had begun. "They're here," Lyra said, her voice sharp and commanding. "Get to the launch bay, John. It's time to fight." John didn't need any further encouragement. He followed Lyra down the corridors of the ship, his heart pounding in his chest. Every step felt like a drumbeat, building the rhythm of the battle that was about to unfold. He had no idea what awaited him, but one thing was certain. He was going to face it head-on. They arrived at the launch bay, where the Xantari fleet was preparing for battle. The sleek, powerful ships stood ready, their engines humming with the energy that would soon carry them into the heart of the conflict. John's eyes scanned the ships, his mind racing. Could he really be a part of this? Could he truly make a difference? Lyra led him to one of the smaller ships, a sleek fighter that would carry him into the heart of the battle. It was designed for speed and agility, perfect for someone who needed to navigate through the chaos of a battle. As they boarded the ship, Lyra helped him strap into the cockpit. "You'll be in the thick of it," she said, her tone serious. "Stay focused. Trust yourself. You've learned everything you need to know. The power is inside you. Use it." John nodded, trying to calm the storm of nerves in his chest. He had no choice now. The Xantari depended on him. The fate of their entire race was in his hands. With a final deep breath, he engaged the ship's engines. The world outside the cockpit blurred as the ship shot out into space, heading straight toward the Zarkan fleet. The vast emptiness of space stretched out before him, dotted with the bright lights of distant stars and the ominous red glow of the Zarkan ships. The enemy was close. Through the ship's HUD, John saw the battlefield unfold. It was chaos. Explosions rang out in the distance as Xantari ships engaged the Zarkan forces, bright flashes of light marking the destruction. The Zarkan fleet was vast, and their ships were formidable. They showed no mercy as they tore through the Xantari defenses. But John could see it. There was something else, something in the way the Zarkans moved. They were driven by force, by power. They didn't have the same unity, the same determination that the Xantari had. John's ship shuddered as enemy fire ricocheted off the shields. He gritted his teeth and pushed forward, his hands steady on the controls. The power inside him stirred, a low hum beneath his skin. He didn't need to think. He just needed to feel. The first Zarkan ship loomed before him, its massive form dwarfing his small fighter. It fired at him, and instinctively, John reached out with his mind, deflecting the incoming blast with a burst of energy. The ship's shields flickered, absorbing the hit, but he had done it. He had used the power. The energy surged through him, and in that moment, he realized something. He wasn't just using it, he was becoming it. He dove his ship into the chaos, weaving between the massive Zarkan ships with a speed that left them struggling to keep up. His hands moved instinctively over the controls, and with each movement, he felt more in sync with the energy within him. He wasn't just reacting. He was controlling the battlefield, guiding the energy through his ship as if it were an extension of himself. The first Zarkan ship exploded as he unleashed a focused burst of energy from his ship's weapons. The Zarkan fleet had underestimated him. They had underestimated the power of hope, of resilience. Lyra's voice came through his comms. "That's it, John. Keep going. You're doing it. The tide is turning." John didn't respond. He couldn't. He was too focused now, too determined. Each Zarkan ship he faced fell before him, their weapons unable to match his speed or precision. He felt like he was part of something greater, something beyond himself. This wasn't just a fight. This was a battle for the future, for the survival of the Xantari, for the survival of everything he now believed in. The battle raged on, but with each victory, John felt the balance shifting. The Zarkans were strong, but they were predictable. They fought with force. But John had something they didn't: unity, purpose, and a power that went beyond mere destruction. He was the embodiment of hope, and hope could change the course of the future. The hidden hero. The battle had been long, and the cost had been high. The Xantari fleet, though bolstered by John's newfound powers, had suffered heavy losses. The Zarkans were relentless, their ships and forces seemingly endless. Yet, as the last of the Zarkan ships retreated into the darkness of space, there was a sense of quiet victory hanging in the air. The Xantari had held their ground, thanks in no small part to the human who had become their savior. John sat in the cockpit of his ship, his body numb with exhaustion. His hands, though still gripping the controls, felt disconnected, as if they belonged to someone else. His mind raced, replaying the moments of the battle in his head. The rush of adrenaline, the focus, the power. He had fought like a warrior, like a hero. But the question lingered in the back of his mind. Was he really the hero? The Zarkans had retreated, yes. But what came next? Was this truly the end? The victory felt hollow, as if something was still missing. He hadn't defeated them all. The Zerrikans were a vast empire, and while they had lost this battle, they would return. And when they did, would John be ready? He leaned back in the seat, staring out at the dark void of space. For a brief moment, the emptiness felt comforting. It reminded him of the world he had left behind. His life on Earth, with its simple routine, seemed like a distant memory now, a lifetime ago. Lyra's voice broke through the silence, crackling over his comms. "John, come in. It's over. The Zerrikans are retreating." John exhaled slowly, rubbing his eyes. "Yeah, I know, but it doesn't feel like it's over." He could hear the smile in Lyra's voice when she responded. "It's never really over, John. There will always be challenges, always be battles. But today, you gave us something we haven't had in centuries. Hope. You gave us a chance to survive. And that's something we can build on." John glanced at the small display screen in front of him, where the image of Lyra appeared. She looked weary, but there was a light in her eyes. She had been right. They had won this battle, but the war was far from over. Still, as he looked at her, John realized something. He wasn't just a soldier. He wasn't just a weapon or a tool in a war. He had something more. "I didn't do it alone," John said, his voice quiet but firm. "The Xanteri, your people, fought too. We all fought." Lyra's smile widened. "Yes, but it was you who made the difference. It was your strength, your heart, that turned the tide. You weren't just a warrior, John. You were the spark of hope that ignited the fire within us all." John shook his head, unsure of what to say. He wasn't sure he could accept that kind of praise. He wasn't a savior. He was just a guy who had been thrown into something he didn't understand and had somehow survived. But as he looked at Lyra, something inside him shifted. Maybe, just maybe, he was more than he had ever believed. Lyra's face softened, her voice full of respect. "The Oracle saw something in you, John, and I think we're all starting to understand what that is. You've shown us that even the most ordinary of beings can rise to greatness." The words hit him harder than he expected. Ordinary. That word had always defined him. He had always felt small, invisible, like he was just another face in the crowd. But here, on this alien ship, in the midst of an intergalactic war, he had proven that anyone could make a difference. No matter how small or ordinary they seemed, they could rise up and change the world. "But I'm still not sure I'm ready," John admitted, his voice filled with doubt. "I've fought, yes. I've used the power inside me. But I'm not like you. I'm not like your people. I don't have the history, the knowledge." Lyra's gaze softened. "You're right. You don't have our history, but you have something more important. You have the future, and you have the courage to change it. That's why you're the one. The Oracle didn't choose you because you were the most powerful or the most experienced. It chose you because you could see a future where anything was possible, where even the smallest, most vulnerable could rise up and stand against the darkness." John's heart swelled at her words. He had spent his whole life thinking he was insignificant, just another face in a crowd. But now he was realizing something profound. He didn't have to be special, or powerful, or perfect. He just had to believe. He had to have the courage to keep going, no matter how impossible the odds seemed. As the ship flew back toward the Xanteri homeworld, John felt something new. A sense of purpose that was deeper than anything he had ever felt. He was no longer just a person caught in the crossfire of a war. He was part of something much bigger, something greater than himself. He was a protector, a fighter, a symbol of hope for a people who had once thought their extinction was inevitable. And as they approached the planet, he saw the Xanteri ships in orbit, their lights flickering in the distance. They were battered, scared, but alive. Their world, their future, was still in their hands. And it was thanks to the courage and resilience of the human who had become their unexpected savior. The ship descended into the atmosphere, and John saw the sprawling cities below. He had helped save them, But he knew this was just the beginning. There would be more battles, more challenges ahead. The Zarikans would return, and they would be ready. Lyra's voice came over the comms again, her tone filled with pride. "You've done more than we could have ever hoped for, John. You've shown us that no matter how dark the universe becomes, there is always light, and that light is you." John smiled softly, looking out at the world below. He wasn't just a guy from Earth anymore. He was a symbol of hope, and as long as there was breath in his lungs, he would fight for that hope, for this new world, and for the future that was yet to be written. He was ready to face whatever came next, because now he knew one thing for sure: he wasn't alone, and he never would be again. This part of the story brings John's journey full circle. After the intense battle and the weight of the responsibility he had been carrying, he finally comes to terms with his role as a hero. The reflection on his ordinary life contrasts with his new understanding of his place in the universe, emphasizing his transformation. The focus on hope, resilience, and courage creates a powerful conclusion to his character arc, setting the stage for the future while highlighting his growth and inner strength.